All right, so hi everyone. I'm Selena Eon. I'm a naturopath and I own a practice called Origin Holistic in Bellevue. Uh, I came to cannabis in kind of a different way. I used to work in harm reduction, where in the late 90s I went to raves and nightclubs and tested people's pills for what actually was in them and hand it back to them as a way to try to encourage safer use. And through that process, I learned that what I learned in school in the DARE programs were completely false, especially where cannabis or marijuana was concerned. Then, in the a little bit after that, the early 2000s, my stepmother was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer that spread to her brain, her liver, her bones. It did eventually take her life. And through that process, as she was dying, my family and I really thought this could be a good option. And my dad said, "Well, you're a doctor. Write her the authorization." I said, "Huh, well, okay." And he and I started giving her medicine along with her morphine to make her life a little more comfortable. Of course, in that case, it doesn't save a life, but it's important. So I've been working with cannabis since then. As Stephanie just mentioned, yes, I end up writing a lot of authorizations, and part of that is that as a naturopath, and actually in any physician, one of the tenets of medicine is first do no harm. And based on that thought, I'm really appalled at what I have to do and what I need to document before I can write an authorization for a patient. Why do I have to give them all these toxic drugs first instead of starting with cannabis first? And if they don't work, give them the dangerous drugs next. Unfortunately, I have to protect my license. That's not how it works. All people that come in, they'll say, "Well, this is what I've been doing for 20 years. I never did any of that stuff." And I have to say, "I'm sorry." As much as I think that is right on, I can't write you that authorization. I have to send you back to your doctor. You need to at least try some of the other meds, especially for pain, but for other conditions, that can be the case too. And I find that extremely frustrating. I also see sick children with a number of unusual diagnoses, and some of them, I'm appalled at what they've come in having already taken. I don't know why they couldn't have tried this first. On that same front, I think it's a little appalling that there's a set list of conditions. At one of the meetings at the naturopathy department at the Department of Health, we and a few other physicians stood up and we said, "Why can't we just use our authority as doctors to decide if cannabis is appropriate for this patient, rather than sitting here checking down the list, oh, do they have one of these?" The Department of Health just said, "Oh, well, that's set by the legislature." Of course, the legislature has added TBIs, PTSD, and I think MPRAC added renal insufficiency, where if you couldn't take pain meds too. But other than that, it's the same list that started back in the 90s. That your authority as a physician doesn't make any difference for that at all. Now, for what I see the most of in practice, I would say is intractable pain. I also see a lot of cancer. I see a lot of digestive disorders and a really horrible number of people with traumatic brain injuries and PTSD, mostly who've suffered from injuries in the military. And I have a growing section of my practice that are chronically ill children who talk to some other parents and they find out that I'm there, and some of them have diseases I'd never heard of. Some of them turned out to have been misdiagnosed. When I sat there, I said, "Something's wrong here, let's keep looking." And some of the diagnoses that have come through the genetic testing I'd never heard of, but I'm still working with those families. And as the young woman talking about ill children correctly surmised, we should be treating them individually and not based on their diagnosis. So that is exactly what we do. We do experiments, we talk about it, we figure out what makes sense. I'm in close contact with those parents. They do not get a piece of paperwork shoved in their face and out my door. Most of those families have never seen cannabis, don't know what to expect. I get emails from them all the time. I got one last night. Right now, one of the trickiest things that I see is, where are my patients going to get medicine? What is that medicine going to be? And can I find anything for them that's close to what they had a year ago? And it's heartbreaking in a lot of ways right now, because I had patients who were stable. They're doing well, and then the system all changed, and many of them don't have access to the same products, or products that are supposedly the same strain, approximately same cannabinoid content, aren't working anymore. What do I do? Wow, that's tough. So those families and I have to keep running experiments, and I'm really frustrated that we're in that situation. There was no viable system set in place before their medicine was taken away from them. As a physician who does not want to do harm to my patients, I am extremely upset. Some of them are back on more dangerous pharmaceuticals that they should not have to try again, that didn't work that well in the first place, and we have to say, well, why don't we add that gabapentin back in? It at least gave you 15% benefit, and right now we can't find the medicine that will do. But that's the state that I live in practice right now. Many of my patients have never even tried or heard of cannabis when they come in my office. I do primary care now under the insurance system, which is new for me the last 6 months. And all patients that have been from doctor to doctor to doctor think maybe a naturopath, and they'll sit down and they'll say, well, we can talk about this more, but I want you to start reading about cannabis and see what you think. You've tried everything else. And they'll say, oh, cannabis, I don't know about this. But invariably, 2 weeks or a month later, at our follow-up, they come and they'll say, well, I read about that. That kind of sounds like a good idea. Can we talk about that today? Yes. Now, why did they suffer for 15 years to, by accident, find their way to me for someone to bring it up? It's because it should be our first-line medicine for a lot of these conditions and not our desperation. And on the same line of what do you do to find medicine for patients, there was some discussion previously about patient growing. That's great, but what do you do? How do they find their seeds? How do they find clones? There's no system set up for that. How do they learn to grow? If you're sick or you have an ill child, do you have the amount of time to figure all that out? I can't send them to somewhere where I'll say, here, there's this place that offers classes in how you can grow your medicine. Those don't exist. And certainly I have self-motivated patients who grow their own medicine, and I really support that. But right now I don't have any viable way to send them that direction except saying, go research it yourself. I don't actually know anything about growing, really, so there's nothing I can do for them on that front. And then when I have patients who are going to grow and already want to, and we figure out how many plants they need, that makes me the plant police, essentially. Can I document that you really need these plants that you say that you need? Maybe I can and maybe I can't, and I have to say, no, I'm sorry, you get that 4 or 6 plants, even though I think you probably need more. Your condition's not well enough documented that if I'm audited, that I can support this. I need people with great big thick charts before I'm going to write a 15-plant authorization for them, even though personally, I would rather they have a lot of extra plants in case of pests, in case of things going wrong. Maybe your power goes out. Maybe someone comes and steals your stuff because they saw you on the registry. Who knows? I would rather that if you're sick or dying, that you not be worrying about it. You have plenty of plants, plenty of medicine, but instead, the way that the legislation works, I'm the plant police. I have to argue and fight with people over this constantly. And it turns into me as the bad guy. Why won't you write 15 plants? This other place will for an extra $50. And say, well, go to that other place. Go to that other place, because I can't take good care of my patients unless I'm making sure everything is perfectly well documented in a way that when I'm audited, I'm protected. It has nothing to do with my personal opinion. And for a lot of people, those 15 plants is not enough. If you're not that good at growing, I'm thinking of a young child that I see. His dad has been really trying to grow his plants, and he gets maybe an ounce on each plant. And things go wrong, and he might not get all those 15 plants. There's no way he can actually grow enough medicines. I don't understand why I can't say, this family grows this much medicine on this many plants. They really need 45. This person needs to juice plants. They need 1 plant per day. They really need maybe 60 to make sure we've got a full rotating supply. Or this person grows outside and they harvest 4 pounds of cannabis per plant. They're perfectly fine with their 4 plants. The law doesn't do anything to delineate those differences at all. So again, I end up as the plant police trying to document everything as well as I can, and it's absolutely appalling in those ways. So when people can't go through all those hoops to grow, they're in the stores where you don't know what terpenes are in those plants, We don't know what pesticides are in them. Sure, they're tested for pesticides, but not for all of them. So if I have a family of children with a condition called erythromelalgia right now, that means that their arms, legs, noses, and ears are bright red and burning, painful, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And these children are 5 and 8 years old. They live with their feet over portable air conditioners all the time, and when they come into my office, they keep their feet in coolers full of ice so that they don't scream at night. Mom and dad don't sleep because their children are screaming and tossing and turning all night. So what do I say? You need to bed. I say, I don't know. Here's what we're going to look for. We'll see what we can find for you. And before I could say, here's what products I want you to try. You can go in the shops and find them. Now it's, I don't know. And how do I find out that the products you're going to use are actually free of pesticides? These children actually get ill from pesticides and get nauseous and vomiting. So mom and dad gave them a completely organic diet. So I did the best that I could to find stuff for them. However, me even providing specific advice like that to my patients violates federal law. So I break laws every single day I go to work, just to tell patients what they should use. So I'm not like your doctor saying, I have no idea. Go into the shop and see what they tell you. Maybe that person in the shop has an idea, and maybe that person in the shop has just been through the 6-hour consultant class. I helped with some of those consultant classes, so I know what's covered in them, and I'm sure they vary, but also it's going to vary on how academic that person is and their personal experience. I want my patient to go in with a pretty specific idea of what they're looking for, hand my script to whoever's at the counter, and say, here's what my doctor wants me to use, find the best matching product. Before I had products that I knew were going to be appropriate, and now I don't. One big gap I'm finding are finding CBD-rich products. I'm finding some, and products that have an equal ratio of THC to CBD, which I found really useful for pain. Are there single products that do that anymore? If you know some, let me know. Right now, I have people trying to mix things together to try to get close to that ratio as they can, as opposed to me saying, here is the specific product that you need. You're going to need 2 drops for your starting dose. Now I don't know, and so I have all these extra problems. And beyond that, when they're in the shop trying to buy these products, they're not getting exempted on the sales tax. So it's unaffordable, and some of my patients are in the untenable situation of, do I buy food, pay for heat, or do I buy my medicine? Which suffering do I choose? I can't believe that that the legislature wouldn't exempt them. However, I went to enough meetings down there at the Department of Health that it was pretty clear they'd never spent a day in an office like mine, thinking that anyone in my office was a liar or a fake. I really wanted to punch them in the face when I heard that. I wanted to say, come to my office and meet the sick kids. Come to my office and see people who are dying of cancer and their family is dragging them in. It should not be this last resort suffering kind of option. But if they'd seen that, I have a feeling it would have been a different situation that my patients are in. And then the last note I wrote down here to cover is that for patients, making sure that you document your condition with your healthcare provider is absolutely critical. Whether that person is cannabis friendly or not, you tell them how you are doing at every appointment and mention that qualifying condition. Get it documented. Do not only come in to your authorizing doctor if there's someone different once a year and say all these things have gone wrong and have me search your chart notes and say it's not there. But I say, oh, I didn't tell them because the cannabis is working well. Great. But you absolutely have to document all of that, especially in the scenario now where your medicine may not be available. If something goes wrong, you want to be able to show that it's well documented. If you end up in court, if something happens, you want that all there. That is absolutely 100% critical. Don't let that wait. Even if you're just in for a yearly physical, you mention what's going on in your body. Tell them, have them write it down.